All right? Does this sound good? Cool, awesome. Hey, everyone. Everything you need to know before with a big asterisk, because some of these things are before, some of these things are at the very beginning. I'm not going to talk about the problems at the end, but these are the problems that you should be thinking about when you start developing your game, even if you don't know if you're going to go into consoles. My name is Andreia Gaita. Shana is my handle. You can call me Shana. And I run my own little company called Spoiled Cat, where I do ports and other things. I'm also an archaeologist on the side. That's a new innovation that I'm having fun with. And these are the things that I've worked on over the years. I'm currently spending most of my time doing Godot for consoles with W4. I've worked on the Unity engine before. I've worked on a bunch of games. I'm going to look at a couple of games that I worked on just for examples of things that would have gone better if people had been nicer to me when, when they started doing development. We might not go through every single one of these topics because this is a really short talk. And there's a lot of things to cover, but feel free to run after me after I do this and ask me more questions. If you have them, I will cover what I can in the next 20 minutes. So, I'm going to start with the things that you as game developers, game designers, decide on when you're making a game that I cannot change at the end, that may impact my quality of life, basically, when doing a port. And the first one of these is input design and player interactions. Basically, please, when you're making your game, put in controller support, even if you never ship controller support. Because you are developing on a PC with a keyboard and mouse. This is your natural way of interacting with the computer, and it's going to be the natural way that you're going to interact with the game, and that is going to skew how your game is designed in terms of interactions, how you expect the player to interact with the game, like how much accuracy you expect a click to happen, how you design your UI, how you design like all of the things around it. Even if you're not thinking that you're doing this, you are doing this when you're only using keyboard and mouse. So, to make life easier at the late stages of porting and when you're thinking about porting or shipping, add controllers. Add touch, add a lot of things that will force you to switch out of the keyboard and mouse environment and think about other ways of interacting. So this is Diablo 3. I really like this game. It has ports for all the consoles. It's an old game, and when it was originally made, it was originally made with keyboard and mouse. No controller support, different age. And the way that movement is designed in this game, you click on things and the character moves. Now, I want you to think about how that works when you don't have a mouse and you only have a controller. You can think that if you have a keyboard, you have WASD and you move things around. How are you translating those types of motions to a controller? How are you going to map that to the users? Movement is not hard to kind of think about alternative ways of making your character move. But then, for instance, the barbarian here has abilities that require precise aiming. Not only this character, but other characters. They have gameplay mechanics that require you to aim at a specific place on the screen and either click or move towards it. And when you move to a controller-based interaction, you do not have this precision anymore. You cannot aim at a single enemy with a little cursor to go there. In fact, for consoles, Diablo 3 has changed gameplay mechanics for certain characters. They have different abilities, because the abilities that they've designed originally for the PC just don't work. You can't translate those into the controller. So you don't have crossplay on Diablo 3 because the characters are incompatible, but also they must have spent a lot of time making these ports work, because that's a lot of work. And this is not even talking about performance or UIs or anything. This is just about how characters move and interact. Same thing with aiming, individual aiming. The thing that irritates me the most in consoles is they can't just wipe out all of those tombstones because I can't aim at them. I can only like spray them and hope the thing breaks. And breakables are a mechanic in Diablo, so the fact that I can't, as a player, break things because I can't aim at them with a controller is irritating. Drag and drop. Does your game rely on dragging? Did you think that you're going to go and, you're going to put this on a phone and someone's going to drag with the finger? But you can also do the same type of mechanic very easily with the mouse. How is that going to translate into a controller-only support? Are you going to put a cursor on your screen and have the player move the cursor manually with the stick of the controller? Will that feel good? Can you imagine multiple dragging like I'm doing here with the watch opening, multiple dragging of the cursor with the stick? Imagine that type of motion. So all of these examples are, when you're designing these types of interactions, they need to be a decision that you take consciously, knowing that it's going to be hard translating these to other platforms. And on consoles, controller is mandatory. It is not an option, even if you have a touch screen on a Switch. The controller mode is mandatory. So you need to think about how players are going to interact with your game. And the best way to do this is not to port up front, but just to build in controller support on your game, and every now and then, go and play your prototype with your controller. This is another example of a problem that they ran into because the game was designed for mouse and keyboard, where on the left side, it's a bit dark, but that's what we got. On the left side, you got a Diablo 3 PC UI. On the right side, you have the same character, slightly different powers, but the same character on the console. This is a lot of work to redesign. Someone did a really good job with this port because this port is very functional, and I wish I had the console UI on the PC. It's much faster and more functional to navigate the console, but they didn't do it to improve the UI. They did it because literally the one on the left is not usable as is for controllers. And the goal, again, is not to recommend that you do everything for PC and then redesign for consoles, is to actually design your UI so that it can go through both without having the double cost of now having to redesign your entire UI for a different platform. Because if you don't think about that up front, it's going to be a problem later on. Same thing for Baldur's Gate. This is Baldur's Gate on the PC. Baldur's Gate 3, this is exactly the same on consoles. It's a completely different UI. Really great, interesting ports also in this genre is Stellaris, which you can think about as purely mouse and keyboard game, the most heavy input UI density that you can possibly imagine, and their consoles port is great. It's functional, it really works. That is a lot of work. You might not have the budget for that, so when you're starting your game development, you need to keep these things in mind so that your life is easy. So these are the things that are important to keep in mind. Don't forget these tips. When you start designing and developing, add controller support. Think about how the players are going to interact when they're on the couch. The only thing they have is the controller. They don't have a touch screen, they don't have a mouse. And define, when you're defining mechanics that require dragging, moving, speed, make those configurable. Figure out what feels good in one of the platforms, because you're going to need that baseline when you're porting. Every controller stick speed, every drag in every single console platform is different. You can't just, this is 100 feels good, 100 is going to feel good there. That's not how it works. But if you have a good baseline of this is the speed that feels good for this type of input, it was going to feel, you can then go into a port and go like, I'm going to adjust these values until it feels the same. The best way to do this for consoles, before you start going into consoles, is designing for the Steam Deck. Steam Deck has a very similar feel to the Switch in terms of how you interact with it, and if you design for the Steam Deck, not for the mouse pad that it has, but for the feel of having the Steam Deck in your hand and playing, if you design for the Steam Deck, it's going to be easier going on to the Switch. So, control support, please, please, please. Let's talk full screen effects. We had a whole talk about cameras here. I'm going to add on to that one You can do all the cameras you want, but oh my God. Okay, so most multipass full screen effects are this. This is Tunic. Tunic has SSAO going for it, bloom, depth of field, tone grading. Every single one of these is a full screen pass. Everything on rendering is a full screen pass. More specifically, these types of post-processing effects require sampling the entire screen. Because when you're doing bloom, fog, SSAO, blur, all of these, all the areas need to know what other areas of the screen are doing so everything meshes nicely, which is why it's multipass full screen. The problem is not all GPUs are capable of doing this in a whole chunk. CPUs on mobile CPUs, the switch, not CPUs, GPUs, sorry. Mobile GPUs, the GPU on the switch are tile-based rendering GPUs because instead of dealing with the whole screen at once, they render in chunks. This is because they don't have a lot of memory bandwidth, and so they can't load the entire thing all at once. They just don't have enough memory to load it all at once. And instead, they chunk it, right? So they'll divide this into squares and chunk it. Now, blooms, SSAOs, all of these effects require sampling across tiles because they require sampling across the entire screen, which means the GPU is going to have to load a chunk and then load another chunk to sample the next chunk and then unload that chunk to load the first chunk, and it's just doing this constantly. And every one of those effects is a pass. Some of those are 2 passes, and the GPU is doing this constantly. When Tunic was getting ported to the switch, it ran at 5 FPS. Because of other reasons, but because of all of this. And what happens when you get to this point is you're now going to have to go and rewrite your shaders to do 1 pass for all of the effects, or 2 passes. You're going to have to write a shader that does SSAO and bloom at the same time, because then half of the time it's only 1. You're still doing the chunks, you still need the memory, but you're reducing the time. If you get to that point, it's too late. And why is it too late? Because the art style was designed requiring these type of effects, right? The SSAO shadows are not baked into the art. But if you take out the SSAO, it's no longer Tunic. So the art style decisions at the beginning of development were made in such a way that require these post-processing effect stacks to be there. And by the point where we're starting porting, we can't do anything about it. The only thing we can do is try to mimic it in ways. Then people complain about banding over here, the shadow is not resolution enough. It's like, I don't know what to tell you, I can't take it out, but this needs to run. And so, when you look at other Nintendo games, actually, you will notice that Nintendo does not have SSAO. It does have still fog, and you get this water kind of feel that they have across the entire screen, but they don't actually rely on a lot of stacked effects because they know what their GPU is capable of. If they want SSAO, they will bake it into the art. The artist will actually draw it into the art, and then there's the shadows there, right? When we come to porting time, I can't tell the artist, go redraw all of the art. So when you're thinking about your art style and you're starting development, think about what that style means. Are you going to rely on a lot of very complicated effects? Maybe bake some of those effects into your art. Is it a Tunic style? I would love for Tunic to just put all that SSAO directly into the art, because those things are not going to move as much. Like, if that had happened, it would have been easier. So think about like what you are relying on for your art and try to make your art work for you, not relying on the GPU to do all the work. Because that's very, very hard to fix. It takes a really long time and, it costs. So be careful with post-processing effects. You can play around with all you want. You can even prototype in Unity all the effects and then see if you can, put that in the art and cut down on that stack. All right, so these things are the things that came in very early in design. Game designers, game artists think about these things early on. When you're starting coding and you're putting systems in place and you're starting the development, think about the fact that you can't access files willy-nilly on consoles. Your game will load your textures just fine directly, as fast as it can, because those files are essential for your game, but other things aren't. If you're loading extra content from download areas or temporary areas, like manually the file.read, if you're loading save files and you're expecting that you do save.load and you wait until that thing returns for your content on that thread, you're going to hang. Because all file I.O. that's not essential file I.O. on consoles is asynchronous, all of it. You ask it to load, and eventually it will give you either a callback, a signal, or an event with the data that you requested at some point in the future. And making code that relies on, I'm going to wait until this content is loaded before I do anything else, and making that asynchronous is actually super hard when the game is relying on this. The game is relying on loading a scene, but first I'm going to load this thing. Until this thing is loaded, nothing else happens. And then you're hanging for I don't know how many frames, and then you fail certification on the console because you can't hang for that much time without rendering on the screen. But you can't load the scene because you're waiting for this content. It's a problem that is annoying to solve, and I have to go constantly into code and fixing it with a bunch of hacks because people are expecting these things to happen immediately when I do it. It happens on Windows, you're fine. On Linux, you're fine. On Mac, you're fine. On consoles, you are not fine. So when you're coding, if you're a developer, you're making code, don't expect any system calls to return immediately. Do your code in a way where you call the thing, and then at some point you'll get back a message. Build the event signal, event signals, callbacks, do whatever. Even if it's automatic on Windows and it just returns on the same frame. Because when you're porting, it's much easier to, your game is no longer making assumptions, and it's much easier to do the ports. We're also on saves, the similar thing, but save APIs on consoles are very, 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 very special. Some of them go to the cloud. Some of them require mounting file systems, waiting a bunch of frames for the file system to be mounted, and then requesting permissions, bunch of pop-ups, dialogues. It is very complicated. Now, most engines hide the complexity from you up to a point. But if you are relying on file I.O. to just read a save file from disk directly, like you would on Windows, that's going to not work. Again, all of these APIs are asynchronous. All of them are special, require multiple steps. So in this case, again, you're writing your scaffolding code. Just assume that it's not going to be a load and wait or write and wait. I'm going to save a file, load a file. At some point, something's going to tell me it's done, and write your code logic in this way. This is especially problematic when you're writing saves, because the switch specifically has limits on how many times you can hit the file system. And I have seen games that save on area triggers. You have a little invisible area trigger, the character goes through it, and we're saving position, and then the character is just bouncing around between this area trigger, and then you're hitting the file system every time. And you can do this on Windows. Windows does not care. You're going to fail cert on switch certification because there's only so many times that you can hit the file system for battery reasons. They don't, hitting the file system costs battery, and the way that they keep their battery life is to prevent you from doing that. And so, all of these constraints are not, oh my God, I'm doing this wrong. No, just think about, use save points, expect things to be asynchronous, use callbacks to return this data. Don't block waiting for a system call to return because you might hang. If you just put these assumptions in place as you're writing, when you get to ports, this stuff is just going to be practically done for you. It's going to be very easy to port. And your porting partner is not going to have headaches, which is nice. I like not having headaches. I'm going through this pretty fast. OK, so I can do this last topic. OK. Again, localization is a pain. Localization is a pain. Everybody knows localization is a pain. I'm going to say something super obvious. I'm sorry. This is super obvious. But all text must be replaceable. I don't care if your engine supports APIs that do this for you, or if you have to build a system, you have to get a third-party plugin, it doesn't matter. Every single thing in your game needs to be a token that reads the translation, even if you don't have translations. Now, because what happens is, on consoles, if you declare that you're going to support 2 languages, just because you have a piece of text that your mate decided to, hey, I speak something, I can translate your game for you, every single piece of text must be translated. Menus, user settings, everything. And I mean everything. Trophies, achievements, the store, terms of service. The URL, if you open terms of service, must be translated. Everything and anything. Which means if you use icons with text for up and down, those need to be translated. Especially if you use icons for buttons on the console, and the console has different names for those buttons, you're going to have to replace those. That's considered a translation. It's a translation layer like everything else. And so this is not a thing up front, but it is, again, a thing that you need to consider, that you need to have all this text somewhere else on a spreadsheet that your localizers are going to have access to, and you have to have an easy way of importing this into the game. And you need to do this early enough, because going into 50 different Unity scenes, trying to figure out where you hard-coded some piece of text is the worst. And then the other problem is text occupies different amount of space on the screen. And if you're going from English to German, and your UI expects a certain amount of size for your text, and then you stuff German in there, that's not going to work very well. So you need to also consider that if you're going to have localizable text, you also have to redesign all the UI to make sure you're going to have to do a test pass to make sure everything fits, and design your UIs accordingly. That's going to bite you in the end, so at the beginning you need to consider making sure that the systems are in place so that you can easily swap languages to be able to test this. Because someone is going to have this pain at the end. Or just don't use text unless you're a novel and use icons for everything. That's also a strategy. So that was the 5 things that give me headaches. I hope that was helpful. Questions?
So in regards, thanks for the talk. In regards to the screen effects on the Switch, how much do you think that's going to go away now with the Switch 2, and is that still going to be a relevant thing?
I need to look at the docs for the Switch 2 because I hadn't had time yet. But I suspect, the processor's the GPU is going to be better, but I highly doubt that they have changed the underlying way that the GPU works. Which means it's going to be more, you're going to have less problems, but then again, every year everybody pushes more and more memory into the GPU, so it probably is going to just scale in the same way. Now it's going to be really nice for things that were made for the Switch 1, because the Switch, more power, but then in 3 years, by the time you ship, you're going to get stuck again because you're making assumptions based on today's PC power and Steam Deck power, which the Switch 2 is not going to be able to match as usual. So the consoles are always a few years behind in this manner, and this is why you get shot in the foot. So there's always a solution. There's always ways of fixing the performance. And you never know what you're targeting. So these are not, don't do this, don't do full, no, this is not that. This is be aware. This is a problem. URP has this problem. If you're going to stack 10 effects on top of the camera, you're going to hit problems anywhere you go. If you're going to ship it, put it on an iOS device, put it on Android, and see how it works there, because those devices have similar constraints. So, you can, okay, this is probably a good benchmark.
Any other questions? No? Then.
All right.
Oh, did I miss one? No? Then I have a little question. Did you ever were tempted to change the game a bit to make a port work and maybe not even tell the developer that you changed
No,
something?
I tell the developer, we need to sit down and redesign this, the entire way that the drag mechanic that I showed you works. Because this is just not, like, I'm getting cramps on my thumb just trying to move the controller in a way that makes this game work. You need to, you've made this decision, okay, this game relies on this decision, let's sit down and, like, these are the options. We can auto-pan, we can do this, we can do that. Like, what do you want, right? Because this is a design decision. This is not my decision. When I make my game, I make that decision. If someone else is making their game, that's their design decision, right? And it's purely design decision whether, how you're going to change the game in order to be able to accommodate this type of interaction without losing, like, the feel of the game, right?
Do you ever end up in, like a fierce discussion with a stubborn developer?
Oh yeah, sure, yes. But I mean, it's not my game, again, right? I have opinions all I want, but in the end, it's their decision that matters. And that's my job to do that. I would like to implement this in another way, but I would also have liked to be in the room when you made this decision, so I didn't have to have this discussion. So, it's a toss-up. It's fine. My job is to make sure that thing runs in a way that has fidelity to the intent. The intent changes, we discussed that. And it's not even arguing stubborn developers, is that the fact that most developers are not aware, they didn't think about what it was like to have a controller in your hands and interact with the game on a couch. So it's just like, hey, okay, think about it. And go like, oh. And then, okay, now we have to figure out how to do this, most of the times.
Okay, we're going to promise you we're not going to make those mistakes from the start. But thank you so very much. We're going to wrap up and give her a...